Well, I'm excited today to have as my guest Matt Thayer, who is my longtime friend and has done an extraordinary job on this new film, The Enemy Within. And I'm trying to get out the word. And I told Matt that I wouldn't do the podcast unless he got Patrick Byrne on. I don't get big celebrities very often. I did interview Donald Trump once. Does that count as a celebrity?
That's
but you have
good.
the most interesting life. You're one of the most controversial people I've ever met. I have interviewed General Flynn, who is also very controversial. But Patrick, Matt, why don't we start with you? Why don't you just give a little background on who Patrick Byrne is, how you met him, and then I want to play the trailer. It's an outstanding trailer.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having us on. Patrick and I we love jumping on and doing these podcasts together. And Patrick is actually one of the most fascinating people I've ever had a chance to talk to. He's also extraordinarily generous and a really loving man. But if people don't know who he is, he actually started a little company called Overstock.com back in the early 2000s. And at one point, Overstock, if anybody remembers and was around back then, was actually rivaling Amazon at one point. And then Patrick, went on to become the Bitcoin Messiah as the first person to take on Bitcoin as a payment in a large company like that, multi-billion-dollar company. But then in 2019, things kind of took a really kind of weird twist when he jumped on Fox News and started talking about being an insider inside of the Russia collusion drama, and actually even having a romantic relationship with Maria Butina, who was one of the people kind of entrapped in the middle of all of that, and ultimately ended up being convicted. A lot of people think that she was convicted as a spy, but as a foreign agent for outside of the U.S. government. And so anyway, so Patrick has been trying to tell this story, trying to alert people to the American people to the fact that he was on the inside of these arrangements, even was involved in a in a bribe with the other presidential candidate in 2016. And so this guy has been all around the world and has been in some very fascinating situations. And we compiled a lot of those stories into a 3-part docu series, which is on Amazon Prime.com, because it's not an easy story to follow. And so we figured doing a kind of a series, like a dramatic kind of political thriller, where we go in and out of both actors and also just firsthand interviews with Patrick here. And we kind of combine it all together and do it into a very entertaining, fun 3-part docuseries that really has been disturbing people and letting people know of what the darkness that's been going on inside the enemies within our government.
Yeah. So Patrick, let me ask you, how did you meet Matt, and why did you decide to do this format? The normal thing would have been someone to write a big book, and hopefully it's a bestseller and people talk about it. And then, occasionally those are turned into movies, but you really created, and I can't even call it a movie. It's part movie, part docudrama. What caused you to do this?
I'll tell you the history. It started, there was it started the day after the Byrne report was delivered. General Flynn called me at 7:01, in the morning, which he does whenever he's angry. And he called and he said, "Patrick, the Republic's hanging by a thread. It may be lost, but if it has any chance, we got to get your story out there." And that led to a series of interviews, which led to a magazine article, which led to me writing a book, which did just what you said. And it actually was last summer it came out. Was it last summer?
I think it was last February, March.
It came out. It was like a bestseller within espionage and different categories in Amazon political biographies. But Matt took it and adapted it wonderfully. I mean, I'm sure he could have made a 12-part miniseries, but he ended up with we didn't know what we were making when he started, but he and General Flynn, it was General Flynn and Matt working together, had the idea of something that looked a little bit like Fog of War. If you remember the movie by Robert McNamara, that about when just before he died, he made a movie about how the truth about how Vietnam got started and what they knew when and such. So General Flynn's idea was to do something like that, but with more dramatic reenactments rather than just news clips. And Matt did a wonderful job extracting the book and adapting it into this script.
Okay, well, why don't we stop what we're doing and watch the trailer? It's only a little over 2 minutes, and it captures very well kind of what this project is all about.
My name is Patrick Byrne, domestic extremist threat number 1. Or not. Perhaps I'm just somebody who's willing to say the emperor has no clothes. You can decide for yourself.
Patrick Byrne. They're following everything that you've been working on.
Yes, sir. Understood.
You may know of me as the CEO of this $2 billion e-commerce company, but really, I have this other life.
You have an unusual relationship with the United States government?
Sir, why are you bringing this up?
The FBI needed me to set up a bribe.
We can't have agents running around creating crimes.
You know, it would violate too many rules for us to do it, but if you're willing to go do it, we'll look the other way.
Hello, my name is Maria Butina.
Then I would make it happen. Instead of being happy, they say,
Just let it play, all right?
"What?"
Let it play?
Now, I know this may look like the Deep Throat scene from All the President's Men, but where do you think that stuff comes from? These things happen.
What you think you know.
I was encouraged to have a relationship,
What you think you are.
and it's heated up.
I'm going to meet the Trumps.
I was starting to realize the feds were using Maria to smudge up the Republican Party, and they were using me to use Maria. And this truth is going to be so explosive.
Erase every moment from your memory.
If you do this long enough, you begin to feel like an enemy of your own country.
They arrest this Russian grad student so they could say, no, there is an actual Russian at the center of our Russian collusion drama. A civilization all begins with the rule of law. And once that gets corrupted, it's like my worst fears have just been realized. I don't know, maybe I'm just being sensitive.
Wow, that was an amazing trailer. I hope it motivates people to go out and get the docudrama, which is why I'm doing this. I'm trying to do my part to help my friend Matt and my new friend Patrick to get this word out, because it's so important. You kind of referred to it earlier. In some ways, our republic is kind of hanging by a thread. It's just incredible to believe that these kinds of things happen in the highest echelons of government. So when you first got involved with all this stuff, Patrick, how did you get involved initially? And you know, if FBI agents approached me with a bunch of crazy ideas, I think I would just shut down. I would go into hibernation and get away from these people. But you apparently got very, very involved.
Well, that's the biggest hurdle to get people over. And what I have to get people over is that I've had this lifelong relationship with Uncle Sam. And never in intelligence, I'm not a spook, but I've helped them on law enforcement, and I've helped them kind of in intellectual circles and in matters to do with peace. I've had so I've had this weird relationship where I'll sometimes be brought in to give a talk on some subject that I've been talking about publicly, or sometimes I've been asked to be abroad somewhere in some matter to do with peace. But so it wasn't, and I've helped on law enforcement. So it wasn't so strange at all when I got wrapped up with these folks regarding the Russian matters. Mm-hmm. And that's where the movie starts off. It wasn't so strange. And then they came and asked me to set up Hillary Clinton in a sting and get her to accept a bribe. So I did that too. And yeah, it is all true. I've been out there with that story for 4 years. And she's never sued, and there's a reason she has never sued on that one.
Yeah. So I mean, and we kind of go into that a little bit of his history. I mean, I was inspired by some of Oliver Stone's, biopics, where it's like, you see Nixon as a child, in the Depression, and then you kind of flash forward to him as a president. And so we kind of took a little bit of that approach where we kind of go back in time and we see Patrick as a young boy discovering, his, really crazy memory that he has. And then also how he kind of got wrapped up into, these things. And like he said, he was always asked to do kind of peaceful missions, peaceful relations between countries, things like that. Somebody that, talks to people before other people talk to people. And Patrick being, from a wealthy family and, also having his own, having his own notoriety himself on Wall Street provided some opportunities that the government would find interesting, and opportunities to create those kinds of bridge and relationships. And then, when the 2016 thing happened and, these missions are kind of like separated, right? They're kind of, isolated out. And so you don't really know exactly how the pieces all put together. But then as Patrick kind of got further along, he started kind of connecting the dots and going like, oh my gosh, I think I'm being used in political espionage, really. And that's when he started to actually turn the tables on them, which is also another part of the film.
Let's talk about how it's relevant today. Some of these, you've been doing this now for, what is it, an 8 or 10 year span that's in the film? And
arguably since 2006. Arguably since 2006 is when I started this assignment. But the relevance to today is this. I was in on a coup. There was a coup that started around Thanksgiving of 2015, and I worked for the players behind it, and I was used in it. I thought I was being used in law enforcement, but I actually was being used to set people up and do things. So I know that we were in a coup. And then 2020, the fake election of 2020 was just the end of that coup. The truth is the coup was also against Hillary, but when Hillary lost to Trump, it morphed into the Russian collusion delusion. They tied him up. They stole 2020. Now, by the grace of God, we've got one more chance at this. But they are all set up. The deep state is all set up. There was absolutely a coup against both Clinton and Trump that came from Barack Obama and James Comey and John Brennan. And I was part of it.
I just recently read Kash Patel's amazing book on the FBI. I forget the name of it, but it was a real eye-opener for me. Thank you. Government Gangsters. I didn't read it. I actually listened to the audio book, which is probably why I don't remember the title, but it was just amazing and now it seems, at least he's talking about trying to clean it up. How do you think the government got in this mess, and what is it going to take to clean it up?
The good news is it's a leadership issue. It's a leadership issue. These people don't go in wanting to do a bad job. They've had terrible leadership. Barack Obama infiltrated across the federal government layers and layers, thousands of people who are social justice warriors of one kind or another. They're progressives. They believe in lawfare. They don't even get. They're so shameless. They don't even get why it's wrong. How they've been behaving has been wrong. They don't even feel ashamed of having been stopped. It's really quaint. They're doubling down. So but this is the crust at the top that we got to get rid of and replace it with good leadership. And with good leadership, we can have a great DOJ again.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. And it's important, kind of like what the trailer said, everything comes down to the rule of law. And when you have people that are up at the top that are manipulating the apparatus beneath them for their own political advantages, that's not a country that's built on Christian principles. We were a country that was built on Christian principles, and the Christian principles just have a long and a long history and a long tradition. And America is supposed to be an experiment that furthers that tradition. And when you have the apparatus of the FBI being taken over by people that are using it, that's not a Christian nation anymore. That's a banana republic. That's somebody that is just getting their way, and whoever's at the top then just makes the law. And that's not what this is about. So this film is really about exploring that and how this man kind of found himself on the inside, and then, bravely stepped forward and, is trying to, do what he can to alert we, the people, who are actually the ones that are supposed to be, dictating to our government what they're supposed to do, not the government trying to manipulate us into believing a reality that benefits them.
I've been looking forward to asking Patrick what you think about what's happening now with Donald Trump being back in office. It looked at one point like he might not win. Things were getting worse and worse and worse. They ran Kamala. There are all these other things going on. And now there seems to be a shift. So what do you think's happening now? And do you think there's any hope to turn this around?
Absolutely, there's hope. And I think he's doing a fantastic job. There's a few things I wish he had done. He's not yet done, but I think that he is working on them. I think he's doing a great job, and we absolutely have a chance. If he had not won, we would have been so destroyed. I think there would have been a civil war. And they had total confidence they were going to win it because they thought that it was rigged for them. Kamala Harris didn't even have a concession speech written because they were so confident in her victory.
And it was anything but a victory. It was a resounding defeat.
Right.
In lots of different ways, as you and the viewers probably already know. Let's talk about why you picked the title, "The Enemy Within."
Well, we have a group of subversives within our government, setting aside the fact that some of this is being driven by foreign powers, particularly Venezuela, Cuba, China. We've been subverted by espionage, by fake election systems. But even so, part of the story to understand is that at a counterintelligence level, we have been subverted by people, government officials, communists, loyal to Cuba and Venezuela. And since we've been saying this, some have been arrested. A guy named Ambassador Emmanuel Rochas has been arrested. He's now doing 15 years. A senior State Department official who we were saying is a spy for Cuba. But we've named others. A guy named Frank Holder. There's others we have named that we believe are actually in bed with Venezuela and Cuba, and there's an effort to overthrow the USA. So anyway, I can go on to so many different directions. Matt,
I was inspired by just the idea, because it's like, it's the oath of, protecting against enemies, both foreign and domestic. And so there are domestic enemies. And so this is a story of not only the domestic enemies, but then what was interesting was that Patrick actually turned the tables and became the enemy within the enemy. Yes. And so the story is really about how when you fight up against corruption and when your government has become corrupt, you actually become an enemy of your own government. And so it's very similar to, even what our founders experienced in trying to, overturn the corruption within Parliament and the way the Crown was treating the colonies, and then ultimately having to break away. What we're experiencing right now is kind of almost a similar kind of a revolution 2.0, where what's great about this, and if we can do this the way that I believe we can, what we can do is actually create a bloodless revolution where we decrease the size of government, which I think it would be the first time in America in human history where a bloated government had actually been, by the rule of law, been decreased and put back into its proper place, and we the people reestablished as the monarch, because that's who we are. We actually are in the place of the monarch over the government, and if we can actually do that without bloodshed, I think it would be the first time in human history, which is pretty remarkable.
It is remarkable. Let's talk about the making of the movie. That's not my business. When I'm exposed to it, I'm always fascinated. But how long did it take you to make? How many hours did you interview? What were the logistics of? Because it's as good as anything I've ever seen.
Oh, thank you. Like Patrick said, General Flynn came to us in January of last year, and we delivered the finished product at the end of October. So it was roughly about a 10-month process, which is pretty fast. because we wanted to get it out as close as we could to the election, because we knew all of this stuff was happening. And the fact that it just came out on Prime right now, I think, is actually kind of very fortuitous, because it kind of coalesces with, what's going on with Kash Patel, like you mentioned, and, some of these exposures that we're now experiencing through Doge and all of this other stuff. But so I wrote, like Patrick said, I got an early copy, an early draft of his book, which was based on an interview. And then we took that, and then I wrote a script kind of based on, I used that to inform the interviewed him, and then we wrote the script. I wrote the script in about 6 to 7 weeks, and then we went and shot it at the end of April and May. I interviewed him some more, and I think we interviewed you for about 45, 50 hours. I think you were in that chair.
Yeah,
and
sounds right.
Yeah. And then we took all of that and cut it all together.
They set up a White House replica, and the actor playing me played me. Flynn played himself. He said he was traumatized reliving that.
Yeah, that was a rough day, but we did.
How was he to direct?
I kind of let him do his thing. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like directing a 3-star general.
But he
is General Flynn after all.
Yeah.
Did he direct you guys and say, this is how it was laid out? This is how this was said?
Yeah, he did. I worked with him. There was a couple things that I wanted to do that he was like, oh no, that's not accurate. And I said, okay, great. I said, I want it to be as accurate as possible. And you were the one person on this set right now that was actually in the room when it happened. So, but a lot of people are actually really surprised by that. They get to that scene and they're like, holy cow, like that's actually General Flynn. And you have we actually were able to use the White House, the Oval Office set from Reagan, is actually it's that same set. And so we were actually able to rent it for the day, and my production designer set it all up. And General Flynn was there, and he was the only one playing himself. And he was able to give us some insight on, okay, this person was here and this person was there, and we had to take a few licenses, and stuff like that. But
he was spot on.
Thank you. He was great. But he did get traumatized.
and did
so
you
Patrick, you were all over the film, kind of as a narrator. Is that the right word? But you got a pretty handsome guy to play you. So Matt did a good job casting that.
Well, yeah, unfortunately they couldn't get he did. They got a handsome young man. What's his name? Heath something?
Yeah, Heath. Yeah.
Good guy to play me.
He did a good job. Now
he studied me for a week. He was always out of the corner of my eye studying me, I could tell, and picking up my mannerisms and things. He's really funny.
Well, he's a good actor. So you said earlier that when you started, you had no idea how to turn out. It must have exceeded your expectations. What do you think of it now?
It actually did, to be honest. So do you mind, Matt, if I tell him the production, the edit history?
Not at all. Go ahead.
We started off with something that was about the first 60% of the story, and it was about 3.5 hours long, and it only got about 60% of the way through. And I watched that first thing and with a couple friends, like, my gosh, the first half of it, we were enthralled. It was great. And then the second half, as one of them said, it just was so overwhelming. It became like seeing, 4 seasons of Game of Thrones reduced into a 5-minute blurb or a 10-minute blurb. Just couldn't follow it. It got so complicated. But Matt continued to work and got it so it included the full story that they wanted to use, as well as there was a real impasse, as I recall, last summer because we couldn't get it under like 5 hours collectively or 4 hours. And that has no theatrical value if you do that. So who came up with the idea of making it a 3-part miniseries?
Well, I was talking to somebody else about it, and they just kind of were like, well, why don't you make a series? And all of a sudden I kind of like, huh. And so we were kind of had a 3-hour cut at that point. And I went into went over to my editor's office and I said, hey, can you just make a mark at like the, at the 45-minute mark? Can you make a mark at the, the hour and a half mark? And because 45 minutes is roughly about the the time span of a hour of television. And sure enough, there was some great cliffhangers that just kind of are naturally there. And so I was like, oh, we got to do this. And so I pitched pretty hard and ultimately ended up winning the day on the 3-part docuseries. And people love it.
Against that? Who was against it? Was I against it?
Yeah, you were against it, and I think somebody else. But it's fine. That's what happens. That's the art of movie making. There's always contentions, and it
really came out great. It came out.
Well, thank you. And what's amazing is that if you sat down and you said, "Hey, I want to watch a 3-hour movie," right? People are like, I don't have the time. But then all of a sudden, it's like you chop it up into hours. People will binge 5. You know what I mean? Like they'll just sit there and watch, 5, episodes of TV, which is 5 hours.
And that's what we want
content.
people to do. And we only we have less than 2 minutes, so we want people to go. Matt, tell us again how people can see this, because it's really worth your while.
Yeah, so you just go to Amazon.com. It's actually right there on Amazon Prime. You can just pull it up on your TV and just search for The Enemy Within. And there are a couple of other titles, but ignore those. Looking for the one that has Patrick standing there in front of a table in the dark. It's a really great poster, and it's got a gold lettering, but it's called The Enemy Within, and it's a 3-part docuseries. You can watch it right now tonight. And you won't regret it. Although I will caution you, word of warning is that if you start it off at 11 o'clock at night, you will be up until like 2 o'clock in the morning watching it, because I've had so many people text me like, "Thanks, man. Like it's now in the middle of the night. I just got done watching your thing." A
lot of reviews talk about binge watching. A lot of the reviews say just that. How I started watching this and ended up just watching all 3. It's 3 great episodes, Matt.
Thanks,
so Patrick, I'll give you the last word.
Well, they say in theater of some scripts that they read better than they play. This movie Enemy Within was a lot more fun to watch than it was to live through. But you will enjoy it. It's a lot of entertainment for $12 on Amazon or Google Play. Enemy Within, and it's really the production quality came out far higher than I had any idea. It's very slick and well done. We're entering it, and it's getting entered in festivals and such, I believe.
Yeah. Thank you for watching the Strang Report today. To me, this is one of the most interesting interviews I've had. I believe it's going to really take off, and I need your help. So post this on social media. Be sure to hit the little thumbs up sign that you like it. That helps us with the algorithm, believe it or not. And if you haven't subscribed to the Strang Report, please do it so that you're notified every time we put something on. And look at some of my past episodes. I've done almost 1,000, not all of them video. That would include the audio ones I did. And I think that you'll find a lot of interesting material. The best place to go is to strangreport.com or to Strang Report on YouTube. Thank you again for watching. God bless you.